record. Okay, thank you all for coming over to the next session. I'd like to introduce Ulpa Chauhan, who is a wonderful human being, a TEDx speaker, and a very interesting woman. I'm going to let her talk because she has a hard stop at 5 after the hour. But if there are any questions that cannot be answered, we will send those to Ulpa and get answers for you by email. And so take it away, Ulpa.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Eric. And thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you all for joining me for this session today. So as Eric said, my name is Ulpa Chauhan and I work with Beyond Bamboo Global. And we are a planet conscious company providing organizations with products and services to help everyone to sort of make a difference and move towards a better world, really. So, I mean, I guess I'll start sort of with something that's quite obvious in terms of the pandemic. And I know that we've got some speakers coming in tomorrow who are going to also be speaking about that too. But what was really interesting during that period was how we went from having everything, well, especially here in the UK, which is where I'm based, having everything at our fingertips to suddenly going to the point where we were actually having food shortages. And just a little story on that, I remember my mother-in-law telling me that she had to get some rice because I was doing their shopping for them during the time. And I said, yes, that's absolutely fine. I'll go and pick some up for you. And I said, they're only doing the small bags. Being Indian, of course, you know, she wanted a 5-kilo bag. And I bought her a kilo of rice and she was like, that's not enough. You know, I'm going to need more. So there was clearly, you know, a food shortage. And I think the media didn't help with that. But what's really interesting is how in our current world, we've actually got two extremes. So we've got food shortage, which obviously we experienced during the pandemic, but actually is an everyday thing for many, many people. But the opposite end of that is food waste. And in countries like where I live in the UK, and I'm sure in a lot of countries around the world, it's a real problem. And I don't think we realize that. And what's really interesting is yesterday was actually Stop Food Waste Day. And it's interesting that we've come to a point in the world where we actually have a day where we're highlighting about food waste. And I think it's a much bigger problem than we realize what it is. And the Worldwide Fund for Nature actually identified that 40% of the food that's produced actually goes to waste. So that's quite an interesting sort of figure to think about. 40%, that's almost half of the food that is produced that goes to waste. And around 10% of that accounts for the global greenhouse gas emissions, which is 4 times more than the world's airlines. Now that's quite a statistic when you think about it, you know, and that's food. But where it gets really interesting is that food waste, they've identified, is the main cause of the loss of forests, grasslands, and other critical wildlife habitats. And when we throw away food, we're not just wasting money, but also when food is discarded and it's sent to landfill, where it produces methane, methane is actually a greenhouse gas, which is 86 times more lethal and powerful than carbon dioxide. So you can see already how much of a change, how much of an impact food waste has, not just immediately to us, but also to the planet as a whole. So what I just want to touch on actually, because I was in Valencia over the weekend, and it took us a conversation with people on the street who were locals to find a local restaurant. And so in terms of tourism, where we would go to, and this is what we do when we're working with all of our clients, is to really think local. So it was easy for us in Valencia to actually find Italian food. It was easy for us to find other kinds of culinary food available rather than the traditional local food. And it wasn't until we sort of spoke to a local that sort of came about. Now, you might be familiar with the 3 R's, which is to reduce, reuse, and recycle. But where we want to take you to is a place of 3 different R's, which is actually reduce, reduce, reduce. And that is the first place that we need to go to before we even think about recycling or anything like that. And an example for you is restaurants. Let's take restaurants, for example. And it's a conversation I had with a client. And they said, oh, but we're going to have to switch to alternate paper straws and they cost more. Well, actually, if we think about it, we have a perfectly great instrument of our own to be able to drink from, and that is our own mouth. So why do we even need to swap a plastic straw for a paper straw? Now, I'm not saying that that is what should be done, but actually, if we think about it, you could have, a supply of straws, if you like, for those customers that require it. And many a times I have been in restaurants where I've requested that I do not want a straw, but have still been given one. So you can see how just by reducing, it is an educational process, and that was what is going to be really important. And what's important to understand is we need to employ a whole system thinking to consumerism, which is where the circular supply chain idea comes in. Now, switching to sustainability shouldn't mean it's about ticking the box, because when you do that, what you're opening yourself up to are companies that are going to be greenwashing. And greenwashing is where people claim that they're ethical, sustainable, and actually not doing it. And here in the UK, we have a law now, which is done by the CMA, the Central Marketing Agency, where people will now get fined, organizations will get fined if they say that they are ethical or sustainable or zero waste or net carbon, and they're actually not. So that's quite important to understand. But what does sustainability even mean? I think the word gets thrown around often that we don't know what it even means. Now, sustainability generally means do no more harm, but where we take you to is to go beyond sustainability. We want you to go beyond that. And again, this goes back to the circular thinking and circular approach. And what that means is thinking about everything within your supply chain being food for something else rather than it being waste. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So there's an organization that we work with who collects coffee beans from coffee shops around London and then converts that into skincare products. So they use it in scrubs, they use it in face creams, and really sort of thinking about, okay, when I'm finished with this product, what can it do? Even if you think about a banana, for example, banana comes in the skin, and often we just throw the skin away. But actually thinking beyond that, right, what can we do with the skin? And there's some great recipes out there. I recently myself made a jackfruit pulled kind of, not jackfruit, a banana skin pulled wrap that was done from banana skin as opposed to jackfruit, which can often be done, or with pork if you're a meat eater. So it's just getting people to think about how can we utilize what we're already using and what can we do. So in terms of what can you do, depending on what it is that your business is, it's about thinking about putting a plan in place. So let's cut food waste through our planning, adopting a zero waste approach. And so that means that if there's any part of something that you can use, utilize it. Now, we often just think of just the food, but actually think about the packaging, because the packaging is also just as important. Now, no packaging would be the ideal solution, because I know that we are switching to things like compostable and biodegradable packaging. But the problem we have here is if it is not disposed of in the correct manner, it doesn't have any effect. So for example, if you have a biodegradable packaging, but it goes off with all of your landfill rubbish and it ends up in landfill sitting underneath all the regular rubbish, that item is not going to biodegrade. Because in order for it to biodegrade, it obviously needs oxygen and whatever for that to happen. And so it's really important that governments and policymakers put into place and practice things that encourage and support businesses to think about being what we call planet conscious. And the idea behind that is it becomes something that is an easy and effortless decision for businesses to make. Because if they see it as something that's a barrier, it suddenly becomes, well, we're doing what we're doing and it's quite easy to do. There's no need for us to change what we're doing. But if we can make sure that there are processes and everything in place for businesses to make the most of what they can to make what they use into their supply chain as circular, then that's going to have a bigger impact. The other thing is to question, and engage with local suppliers, local businesses, local policymakers, because the more that you can go local, the less likely that you are to have issues with your supply chain issues with food shortage, issues with even food waste, because you're now being able to speak directly with those that are locally producing and supplying products, rather than having to rely on things being shipped across the world, and again helping to reduce down those carbon emissions. Now, I know from traveling, I've been in the travel industry for over 20 years as well, I've worked in it as well, is that people are often traveling because they want that local experience. You want to experience local culture, you want to experience local food and drink. And so it's really important that those things do exist, and that we don't switch to providing tourism because we want tourism, with everything and anything, just because that just makes it easier. And in terms of, making that switch, I guess, and not being overwhelmed by it, because this is something that can actually happen, is when making those decisions, we can easily start to point fingers and go, you're not doing this, and you're not doing this, and why you're not doing this, or I can't do this because the government's not letting me, or the government hasn't put this into place, or there are no policies in place for it. And it's easy to create a blame culture. But moving away from that blame culture and being more innovative and creative is really going to help you make those changes. And that's really important to do. And those businesses that will survive, and we've seen it throughout the pandemic, the businesses that have survived are the businesses that have been innovative and creative in what they do. So it's understanding that it can seem overwhelming, but what we don't need, and this is an example I always give, is if 1 billion people, or if one person, first of all, says it's just one plastic straw, and 1 billion people say it's just one plastic straw, that's 1 billion plastic straws. What we don't need is everybody doing zero waste. What we need is everybody doing something. Thank you for your time.
Ulpa, thank you very much for that. You said when we were just starting to get started that you were going to try and summarize everything and put all the salient points together in one. And I think you've done a great job of that. I would encourage everyone to please type your questions into the chat or the Q&A. And even if we don't have time for your questions, we'll make sure that Ulpa answers them. Ulpa, if you don't mind, if we can do that by email after. I do have one question that I've always wondered about this. So I know that this idea of waste and sustainability and recycling is really a critical issue for destinations, and many tourism marketers want to do it, but they're constrained by local government that doesn't have the processes in place. Or, for example, when I went to Nepal, they don't do recycling, right? So what would you tell destination marketers who want to do it but can't get it done?
So again, it goes back to a blame culture, because we could sit there with not just this particular example, but any example, and say, well, there's no policy in place, the government aren't doing enough. But actually, part of what I also do is we run Global Youth Awards every year. And that is where we take 11 to 25-year-olds and we award them for the amazing things they do in the world. And what you find is when it comes to young people, there is no buts, ifs, and I can'ts. They actually just do it. And so what I would encourage is, whether it means that you've got to physically just do it yourself to start with, that's something better than nothing. So even if you switch up a product within your supply chain that isn't quite there in terms of it being fully ethical and sustainable, but you switch it for something that is better than what you're currently using, that is also going to make a difference. So I think it's understanding that when you're trying to just aim for, well, this is where I want to be, and I can't do anything until everything is in place for me to do that, you've got to start making your own actions and doing your own things in order to get there. So I would say that it's easy to say that, those policies are not in place or they don't do this, but we've seen young people, kids, two sisters, for example, called the Meek Sisters, who are called the Kids Against Plastic. And they have been implementing removal of plastic in schools, and went around schools teaching them how to do this, and have ended up at the United Nations talking to them about how they got to where they are. And I think there are two key words that really help with that, and that's passion and purpose. If you've got a passion and you've got purpose, then you will really throw yourself into it and and make a change.
Mm. And I think maybe I might add publicity to that too, because there are businesses that maybe they are doing something or they could do something, but if they don't talk about it, if they don't inform their customers why they're doing what they're doing, we don't do recycling in Nepal. However, because of that, that's why we're serving you with bamboo straws.
Yeah.
Right. And just helping them to understand and create that awareness that way. So even if the systems aren't in place, you can still educate people, because I think that, like when you come to Nepal, you think, oh, this fantastic country for sustainability, adventure travel, all this stuff. But then it breaks down when you look at this other side of the equation. And I think that education could be taken on by those private businesses and help, raise the awareness so that maybe something could be done.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Eric, is that there are two things which are key to this, and that is communication and education. I'm still having conversations with businesses who are still in the mindset of, okay, our policy is going to be no plastic by the year 2023. And we don't want anything that even looks like plastic. Now, that's a great policy to have. However, the businesses that we work with, these innovative, passionate people, are taking the plastic out of the ocean that's already done the damage and remaking it into something else, which is better than actually sourcing raw materials. And so there's definitely education involved. And I think through talking to each other, we can learn more, find out more. And definitely the sustainability space is one of those where it's all about collaboration. Nobody sees anything really as competition because everybody's doing something for the greater good. So I think it's just finding those people who are in that sort of same space as you. And I think once you seek them out, you'll find that you'll work so much better together than apart.
Yeah, agreed. And Bamboo Global, which is Ulpa's, the company she works for, they are a supporter of our sustainability practice group here at the association. And we interviewed the founder, Tiffany, a few podcast episodes ago. So we know that you guys are really, truly committed to it. We look forward to doing more with you. Ulpa, we're going to let you go because I know you've got another meeting. So thank you so much. But if everyone else would stay on, and we'll wrap up separately after Ulpa. So Ulpa, thank you again. And I apologize for the time change.
Absolutely fine. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
So bye-bye, Ulpa. So as Maria was saying, if you have any questions for Ulpa, please send your questions to Maria, and we'll make sure that she gets those questions and that she can answer them for you. Ulpa is a fantastic resource. She is a really intelligent young lady. If you haven't heard her TEDx talk, it's linked in the biography for the FoodTreX Global Summit. I encourage you to listen to that too. As you could hear, she's very well spoken, and she just has a lot of experience, and she has a heart of gold. I mean, she's very willing and happy to share her knowledge and experience and solutions with the industry. Was really impressed when we were introduced to Bamboo Global by Chantal Cook, who is on our board of directors. She knew about them and introduced us. So that very interesting resource. So please don't be shy. Please do email Maria or me as well if you wish, and we will make sure that we get answers to your questions, because I know she's a great resource and we don't want to restrain your access to her. So right now it is 5 after 5 in Spain, 5 after 5 p.m. in Spain. We are going to go back to the revised schedule, which means that we will start again in 55 minutes. And the next speaker is going to be Marie-Claude Vidal from Destination Sherbrooke in Quebec, Canada. And she is another very interesting person, but want to get back on the revised schedule that we published to you. This situation with Ulpa was just because of the time change, and she had a conflict in her schedule. So she very kindly accommodated us. But we'll see you in 55 more minutes, and go back to your list of the Zoom webinars. It's the next one with Marie-Claude Vidal. We'll see you there shortly. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.